Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1277 of the Juicebox Podcast. Stephanie's a 33-year-old type 1 who happens to be an endocrinologist, and she's here today to add to the Grand Round series. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. Drink ag1.com/juicebox. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. And if you are a type 1 or you're the caregiver of a type 1 and you're a U.S. resident, I need you to go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and complete the survey. Completing the survey helps type 1 diabetes research to move forward. It may help you. You'll find out more about that after you complete the survey, and it's definitely going to help me. t1dexchange.org/juicebox should take you about 10 minutes. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Touched by Type 1, touchedbytype1.org, and find them on Facebook and Instagram. Touched by Type 1 is an organization dedicated to helping people living with type 1 diabetes, and they have so many different programs that are doing just that. Check them out at touchedbytype1.org. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Dexcom G7, made for all types of diabetes. Dexcom G7 can be used to manage type 1, type 2, and gestational diabetes. You're going to see the speed, direction, and number of your blood sugar right on your receiver or smartphone device. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Today's episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, a company that's bringing people together to redefine what it means to live with diabetes. Later in this episode, I'll be speaking with Jalen. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 14. He's 29 now. He's going to tell you a little bit about his story. To hear more stories with Medtronic Champions, go to medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox or search the hashtag Medtronic Champion on your favorite social media platform.
Hi, Juicebox. I am Stephanie Tarlow. I'm a physician assistant that specializes in endocrinology and specifically diabetes at OHSU in Portland, Oregon.
Do you have diabetes yourself?
I do. I've had type 1 diabetes since I was 12 years old. So this year makes that 20 years.
Oh, you're 32. Okay.
I'm 33 very soon.
Oh, happy birthday. In July, perhaps?
Thank you.
When my birthday is?
June 27th.
Oh, well, then really happy birthday.
Thank you. Birthday month.
Yeah. Do you do like a whole thing?
No, we typically go out to Eastern Oregon on this little lake for the weekend, which is nice.
Very nice. Well, I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you.
I'm going to find out a little bit about your diabetes first. So 20 years ago, Pretty long time ago, actually, Arden's 20 this year. She was diagnosed when she was
We were diagnosed the same year, from what I could tell, 2004. Is that right?
Arden's born 2004, diagnosed 2006.
Got it.
Yeah.
I was diagnosed in 2004.
Okay, you got 2 years on her. So you're winning some sort of thing that I don't think comes with an award. But yeah. So management back then, I'm very, very familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get a pump at any reasonable distance after your diagnosis?
No, I was very against a pump and anything on my body for that matter. I started out with the NPH and regular insulin mix syringes for like the first year. And then I remember going back a year later to have more education and learn about like carb counting in terms of like using ratios and varying the carbs per meal with pens. And that was like the biggest game changer rather than I remember my parents getting like low carb ice cream and I was so devastated thinking this is my life. But there's so much more flexibility with not fixing carbs per meal.
That was it. It was just the ice cream that said low carb on it. And you were like, oh,
Yeah, it was so sad. I just remember my grandma made everyone like parfaits and mine was sugar-free chocolate sauce and stuff. I was like, God, this is so sad.
And you're old enough to feel it too at 12, huh?
Yeah, I was very much a kid that like would come home from school and grab a Sprite or like have a Costco poppy seed muffin. And so that first year was really hard because I think I was having like 45 grams was the amount I was eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so, yeah, that was pretty restrictive. And then it took me a very long time to give myself a shot by myself. Like the nurses in the hospital were incredible. Usually they make you give it, try to make you give it yourself by the time you leave at 12. And I was just not having it. So it took me until my parents went out of town and I did not want my friend's mom to come over and give me the shot that I just was like, I'll do it myself finally. But it would be times where we'd be sitting down and I'd be like, okay, I'm counting to 3. And then I'd just say 1, 2. And then like 30 minutes would go by. And if my dad ever did it before 2, I would just cry and cry and cry. So yeah, I had a really hard time with the needles.
Interesting.
So I definitely empathize with my patients when they have those needle phobias.
How old were you when you finally did it yourself? When that neighbor was the only other answer?
I was probably 13 and a half or 14.
Couple of years. You made it a couple of years. Yeah. It's interesting. First of all, it's crazy that you got NPH and regular in America 20 years ago. We might bring that up again. But Arden, similar situation. Like Arden got a lot of needles, obviously, in the first handful of years. No one even talked to us about a pump for years. They never even brought it up. I didn't even know to ask about it. And so she probably had, I remember doing the math back then. We probably stuck her 10,000 times between needles and finger sticks.
Wow.
Before she got a pump when she was like 4.5. So like in the first 2 years or so. But she was really young. And I've told this story before, but like, there's once in a while you're like, I think this pump site's bad. Like I'm going to inject to like see. And even that stopped happening because we were just on a really good roll with Omnipod for a long time. And then one day I was like, hey, we're going to have to inject. And she's like, okay. Like she like just was like, okay. And then I got out the syringe and she kind of recoiled. And she goes, what is that? And she wasn't being like funny. She was like, what is that? And I was like, it's a needle to put in the insulin. And she's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then it was crazy because I was like, oh my God, you don't remember the thousands of these that you've had? Like, that's crazy, but she didn't. And
that's super interesting, actually.
Yeah.
But I mean, it makes sense. Like, I think there's a lot of times too, like nowadays, I think we get kids on Dexcom so quick, like they don't remember that small little period of finger sticking.
No, I agree. And then when you go to do it, even now, like I'm like, Arden, check your blood sugar. And she's like, wait a minute. Like why am I wearing this thing? And I was like, So, but anyway, like it happens so infrequently that we didn't realize for a long time, like Arden had a pretty significant needle phobia. And it didn't rear its head until an A1C check one time.
Oh, yeah.
Where she basically like spider monkeyed up the corner of a wall in the room when the phlebotomist came in. And like flipped out, and I had to take her out of the room and like calm her down and everything. And now she's got this crazy, and I mean crazy in the sense of the word crazy that you're thinking of. Like when she gets her blood drawn, she stares at the needle.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, Arden, look away. She goes, I need to see it. I'm like, okay.
Whatever works.
Yeah. But so anyway, one time before she left for college a couple of years ago, I said, you are going to have to give yourself an injection before you leave. Because if it comes up at school, we can't be doing this thing that you just described, by the way. By the way, do you prefer Stephanie or Steph?
Either way. Steph is what most people call me.
Okay. So Steph, the thing you just described, Arden took a syringe with insulin into the bathroom at our house. And she came back about 45 minutes later. And she's like sweaty and disheveled. And she's like, I did it. And we were like, uh-oh. I didn't know it was this bad. You know what I mean? And
Oh, yeah.
You know what actually ended up breaking it for her?
What?
She started using a GLP.
Oh, that's cool.
She has to do an injection once a week. And she's getting better and better at it all the time. So,
which one, I might ask? Because some of them have like the auto inject, which is a pretty cool feature.
So she is using Mounjaro now.
Okay.
And that one's like cap off, unlock, push button.
Mm-hmm.
She had a little more trouble with Ozempic because it's like it's push, like it's a collapsible, like how does it work? It works like the Gvoke HypoPen. Like you have to push it into like click it on, like
exactly.
an EpiPen vibe, right? And
Yeah.
that one is interesting. Like something between the button and the pushing was really, I don't know, it was just crazy how much she struggled with it. But it was helping her and is helping her so much with her blood sugars that even she's like, geez, I got to use this, you know? So
yeah, it's pretty awesome.
do you have people using it in the practice? This episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. MedtronicDiabetes.com/juicebox. And now we're going to hear from Medtronic champion, Jalen.
I was going straight into high school. So it was a summer heading into high school.
Was that particularly difficult?
Unimaginable. You know, I missed my entire summer. So I was going to a brand new school. I was around a bunch of new people that I had not been going to school with. So it was hard trying to balance that while also explaining to people what type 1 diabetes was. My hometown did not have an endocrinologist. So I was traveling over an hour to the nearest endocrinologist for children. So, you know, outside of that, I didn't have any type of support in my hometown.
Did you try to explain to people or did you find it easier just to stay private?
I just held back. I didn't really like talking about it. It felt like it was just a repeating record where I was saying things and people weren't understanding it. And I also was still in the process of learning it. So I just kept it to myself, didn't really talk about it.
Did you eventually find people in real life that you could confide in?
I never really got the experience until after getting to college. And then once I graduated college, it's all I see. You know, you can easily search Medtronic Champions. You see people that pop up and you're like, wow, look at all this content. And I think that's something that motivates me. I started embracing more, you know, how I live with type 1 diabetes.
MedtronicDiabetes.com/juicebox to hear more stories from the Medtronic Champion community. Dexcom G7 offers an easier way to manage diabetes without finger sticks. It is a simple CGM system that delivers real-time glucose numbers to your smartphone, your smartwatch, and it effortlessly allows you to see your glucose levels and where they're headed. My daughter is wearing a Dexcom G7 right now, and I can't recommend it enough. Whether you have commercial insurance, Medicare coverage, or no CGM coverage at all, Dexcom can help you. Go to my link, dexcom.com/juicebox, and look for that button that says Get a Free Benefits Check. That'll get you going with Dexcom. When you're there, check out the Dexcom Clarity app or the Follow. Did you know that people can follow your Dexcom? Up to 10 people can follow you. Right now, I'm following my daughter, but my wife is also following her. Her roommates at school are following her. So I guess Arden's being followed right now by 5 people who are concerned for her health and welfare. And you can do the same thing. School nurses, your neighbor, people in your family, everyone can have access to that information if you want them to have it. Or if you're an adult and you don't want anyone to know, you don't have to share with anybody. It's completely up to you. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com. And when you use my link to learn about Dexcom, you're supporting the podcast.
I do. I use it off label, actually. I don't know how I was able to get it covered, but for one of my type 1s, I was able to get the GLP-1 in the form of the pill covered.
Mm-hmm.
And it just works wonders for their blood sugar. But a lot of times I struggle with insurance. We see a lot of patients on like the Oregon health plan, and that coverage is pretty hard to get.
What I'm hearing from doctors is this. Very kind of medically sound, like this person I'm dealing with has type 1 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
But they also have insulin resistance.
Oh, for sure.
And if they didn't have type 1, they very well might be type 2.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But what I'm seeing here is that a person without like insulin resistance who has type 1 diabetes is using significantly less insulin than this person is. And I think a GLP would help them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing they're sending dual diagnoses into insurance. They're like, look, they're type 1 and they're type 2. I don't care what you guys call it on the computer. That's what I'm doctoring over here. These 2 problems.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And some people are starting to see it get covered that way.
Okay. Yeah. That's great to know. Cause I mean, yeah, when I have patients who come in with a carb ratio of 1 to 2,
Mhm.
that's clearly insulin resistance. And that hurts too. It's not like so for those patients who, if they're on a pump, they're changing their pump every day. And I'll very much off-label use like a U200 insulin if I have to.
Yeah.
But still, I think adding something like a GLP-1 would be awesome. And I know they're doing quite a bit of studies right now, like through T1D exchange and stuff, to get like patients on GLP-1s with type 1. And hopefully we'll get some sort of approval for that too, to make it easier.
Yeah, I think I'm supposed to help soon with the T1D exchange to find people for that study. So I'm excited about it because I've been doing a lot of interviews. Actually, I have one going up probably next week with this guy, 58 years old, type 1 since he was 50. Definitely type 1, like autoantibodies, like, the whole thing. Using insulin forever. Probably had LADA for the first handful of years, but then his insulin needs went up for a couple of years. He started Mounjaro and literally is not using insulin at all anymore.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
It's insane. I've interviewed a 15-year-old daughter, the mother of a 15-year-old girl who's down to like 4 units of basal, and that's it.
Yeah, I have actually a patient. She's probably like 12 or 14, and she's on 2 units of long acting, and we tried to increase her to 3, and it was too much. And that's just so interesting. And her carb ratios and correction are like pretty average for her age, but we just cannot go up on the long acting.
Because of a GLP or just in general?
Oh, just in general. But I think that's so weird, people's different insulin requirements. But yeah, no, that makes sense with the GLP-1 needing way less. And I try to get that too sometimes for patients with metformin, but it just doesn't have the same effect.
Yeah, metformin's nice, but it's not going to do what this stuff is doing.
No, it sometimes decreases long acting a little bit, but nothing to the extent that the GLP-1s do.
So for a number of years, Arden's endo, who manages her diabetes now, was her endo for her thyroid when she was still a juvenile. And she kept talking. So the way we did it was CHOP. Oh, I've never said Arden's hospital on here before. Oh, well, who cares? It's over now. CHOP was managing Arden's diabetes. Listen, they're great, but I was managing Arden's diabetes. But I noticed that their deftness for thyroid wasn't what I wanted it to be. So we found a concierge doctor to handle Arden's thyroid, and she also handles my wife's and my son's thyroid issues, right? When Arden reached 18 and CHOP was like, get out of here. They said it nicer, but I went to this endo and I said, look, I know you don't take new patients and you don't do diabetes really. I was like, but would you manage Arden's type 1 for me, please? She's really nice. And she said, yeah, absolutely. And then she started, she's like, we've been talking for years about Arden taking metformin because Arden's insulin to carb ratio was 1 to 4 or 1 to 4.5. She was starting to have like really like bad acne that we couldn't get rid of, and then stomach issues and heavy periods, stuff that really looked like PCOS, like that whole thing. And she's like, let's try the metformin. And we I almost said dicked around, but you're like a professional, so I didn't say it, but then I said it anyway.
You can say it.
Yeah. But we dicked around for a little while with it because we were like, I don't know. And then once she got her as an adult, she's like, Scott, let's give her a GLP and see what happens.
That's awesome.
And I was like, cool. All right. So holy crap, Stephanie, like Arden's insulin to carb ratio now is like 1 to 10.
Wow.
And her insulin sensitivity went from 42 to like 65.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Her basal went from 1.2 during the day to 0.8, 0.85. And she's using IAPS. So there are times of day when these settings are even lower or sometimes more aggressive. Like, you know what I mean? And more importantly, like we never thought of her as having weight to lose, but she lost weight and she looks healthy now. It's not like we're like, oh God, she looks thin. Like, you know what I mean? Like she had lost a little too much. We adjusted her GLP dose and it's moving the other direction now. But her diabetes is incredibly, incredibly stable. And even if she like flat out just doesn't bolus for a meal until the last second, we're seeing like 180s that come back like in an hour or so and level out.
Wow.
Really something.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
Fantastic. So anyway, I didn't mean to talk about all that. I have you on here to say, I'd like you to be part of the Grand Round series. And all I want to hear from you is what works for people with type 1 diabetes. What are some of the problems you see clinically, or anything really that you want to share that you think benefits doctors listening and patients who are listening?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think what works is trying to find, especially, so I worked with adults for 5 years before, and at Sutter Health in San Francisco before moving back to Portland, where I'm from, and doing peds. And, I think the biggest thing, especially in that young adult population and then the teen population, is really finding a way to figure out what the barriers to care are and connecting with the patient to address those and make them real. Because I think, for every single person, diabetes looks so different. For someone, they might love having lower blood sugars and run themselves in the 60s because they do not want to hide. They're terrified of highs. And then the opposite is a patient who's running themselves so high because they're terrified of lows. And so maybe they're not just missing their insulin because they forget.
Mm-hmm.
So really trying to understand the reasoning behind. I do feel like I have a little advantage. Like when I see a patient's Dexcom or pump report, I can kind of tell what's going on before I walk into the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times too, in these peds kid population, you're with parents and the kid does not want to get in trouble for not doing what they're supposed to. So there's a lot of maybe lying of, yes, I'm taking my insulin, and it's you're not. And so I really love, especially on being able to go through, I think looking at the pump reports together to show well, this day there was only one bolus and this day you didn't enter your carbs one time. Are you not eating all day? And really trying to okay, yeah, I guess I realized I wasn't doing that the whole time. And I think the biggest thing I try to enforce is they're never in trouble. I just have to know what they're doing to adjust in the best way for them. If they tell me they're always taking their insulin and they're on shots, so I can't tell, and then I end up adjusting their doses, then they're going to go low all the time. And then they're going to be afraid to take their insulin. So they're not going to do it. So I really think coming to terms with taking it patient by patient. I don't think there's a one size fits all for every patient, and really bonding with the patient and their family to develop that trust so that they're willing to tell you what's actually going on in life. And with diabetes is the most important thing that you could possibly do. I like to let the families know that I have diabetes, so that I think the patient understanding that when I was a kid, I used to get in trouble at my endocrinologist with my parents for only checking, 2 to 3 times a day. That's a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. And you will be fine. But the more you check, or to convince them to wear Dexcom so they don't even have to worry about that. I think that's all really important for them to see that it's okay to have these problems and you will get over them and it will be okay.
I was really interested because when I started making this series with Jenny, I could tell from her perspective that the most important thing is communication.
Mm-hmm.
And she kept saying, if you're the physician, if you're the assistant, if you are, you need to understand the person in front of you and their specific situation and not judge them just based on your idea of how this should go. I feel like that's what you're saying. I feel like you're saying, if I don't know these people, if I don't know what's happening or why it's happening, then how do I help them? How do they do better, right? So how do you accomplish that though? How do you get to know them and figure out, is it questions you ask? Is it over time? How does that all work?
I think it's a mix of both. When I'm first meeting a patient, I let them know. A lot of times I'll be oh, do you wear a Dexcom, or are you wearing a pump? And they'll be yes or no. And I'm oh, I wear the Dexcom, and they're not on a pump yet. I'll say, yeah, I didn't want a pump for the longest time, but now with this technology out there, it's so good. Would you be willing to just hear somebody out about it? And really just try to level with them that I had that very similar experience and I'm on their side. I just want what's best for them. And I don't like to use, scare tactics or anything like that. I also think letting the patient talk. So I like to find out, what do you feel you're doing well with your diabetes, and what do you think you could do better, and why do you think you're having trouble with this? And having those open-ended conversations rather than just saying, your A1C is too high, you're missing insulin, adjust your dose, see you next month or, in 3 months. I don't think that works. I think making those conversations and letting them know like diabetes is a moving target. So I think A1C is really, especially in our society, like associated with a grade. And if you get an A1C that's high, then you're failing. And I think that's totally wrong. First of all, I prefer time and range anyways, but if you look at a Dexcom report, it's basically a game. We're trying to maximize your time and range. And the best way to do that is to take your insulin. And so like letting them really see like, and going through the report, like, look what happens when you take your insulin before you eat. That spike is so much reduced versus if you take your insulin 15, 30 minutes into the meal, look at how high you spiked. Or if you didn't take your insulin at all and then didn't correct, look at that. Like really trying to show them how diabetes works, I think too. Like these kids are smart. They're having to act as adults at, whatever age they're diagnosed. They're getting this crazy diagnosis that I think it's really impossible for anyone to manage on their own.
Yeah.
But just letting them know, like, even if they're doing a little bit, they're still doing a great job. But just, pushing them to do more and really just being on their team, I think developing that trust is what's so huge.
Did you have trouble as a kid?
I didn't really. I just had like I think community is like so important. And it always breaks my heart a little bit when kids are embarrassed of their diabetes because no one actually cares. Like, and I think in the way you phrase it too, like people think it's really interesting and cool. And so I was really lucky when I was first diagnosed. A family friend made a diabetes team for me with neon pink shirts. And that was the very beginning of my JDRF walks, which I've done for 20 years with like neon shirts, neon green, neon blue. We'd get the whole school involved. Like it was a big, fun yearly event everyone would look forward to. And I think having that community, I was never embarrassed of my diabetes. My friends were amazing with my diabetes, looking out for me like at basketball tournaments and things like that. And then my parents would nag me to test my blood. And I would always, get in a little bit of trouble when I wouldn't check a lot at the appointment. But my A1Cs, I'm a perfectionist, very type A in terms of my management. And, that kind of like the way I was with schoolwork, it kind of just transferred into how I was with my diabetes care. So in that regard, I'm really lucky. Like, I also think at 12, there's like an advantage of being diagnosed at that age because it's still kind of fresh. So, and you're a little bit older, so you kind of have a advantage of possibly missing that burnout. So I never really experienced the burnout.
Okay.
That was helpful. Yeah.
Was your mom helpful with that? Like wrapping that community, the community around you kind of feeling?
Yeah. My parents are my biggest supports and my sister and my grandparents, like they just, really connected me and to who I needed to be with. Like my sister, she knew someone at the high school who was like this football player and like, he's had diabetes for however many years and he did shots and she had him connect with me and like come to my house when I was first diagnosed and just talk with me. And I remember like, he was a senior in high school. And I remember calling him and he was at the beach with his friends to tell him I gave my first injection. And he was like so proud of me and that meant the world.
Yeah. What do you do though if somebody comes in the office and they don't have that around them? They like, what if they live somewhere where people are not as kind and, they don't have a mom or a dad who are going to help them like open it up? Like, they can still benefit from just having I think just a few friends who are like tight and on their side. But, you know what I mean? Like it's easy to say like, go out there, but like, I'm obviously,
100%.
I'm not coming down on you, but obviously the place you went out into was like, oh my God, Stephanie's here. Like what happens if you go out and people are like, we don't care, leave us alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I didn't notice it as much in adult, but when I was really fortunate growing up, I had a great childhood and I didn't realize until coming back to work in peds, how not every family is able to give that to their kids. And it was, it's sometimes really hard to see. And it's really challenging to work with. At OHSU, we have an incredible program called Niche that works with interventionists that are able to actually like go to patients' houses and interact with them. They'll like pick them up and take them to the gym. They'll text them So we really try to get the patients who are struggling or have frequent DKA episodes connected with a niche interventionist. I think that's one of the most amazing things about OHSU.
Wow.
And, not everyone has that though.
Yeah.
And so I really try to give resources of, social media is big. I really like Beyond Type 1. I think that's a great connection for people. It's like a social media for people with diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to connect them with that. And then, I also just talk to my patients, like, what's embarrassing you about your diabetes? Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if someone sees you take a shot or if someone sees a pump on your body?
Yeah.
So just trying to reason with them. But, I do think there's some huge disadvantage that we haven't figured out a breakthrough where, if niche isn't covered for the patient and their families, like, and I have a 11-year-old whose parents aren't involved, like, I haven't figured out a perfect way to deal with that family. It's really hard. And sometimes it keeps me up at night because it's just so unfair for an 11-year-old to have to figure out diabetes. And so I think, again, that goes with, really encouraging and emphasizing to them that, like, every little thing you're doing for yourself is incredible. I say, if you're going to miss a shot, just don't miss your long acting, take that always to keep you out of the hospital, and just doing really mini goals with them to get them to where they need to be. Because at 11 years old, if you're managing by yourself, there is no way you are going to be in target. I just, like, that's so unfair and a very unrealistic expectation.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, especially when what you just said there about, like, explaining to people, like, hey, look, it doesn't matter if somebody sees you. Like, that's parenting. That's not medical care. You know what I mean? Like, you're just being a big brother, a big sister in that situation. That's something you would expect or hope that they're getting at home. And if they're not, and now on top of that, the diabetes comes, I hate to say it like this, but can you identify the people who are going to struggle? Is it not hard to figure out who's who?
It's not.
Okay.
It's really sad, but I feel like sometimes you're pleasantly surprised. But I think, in certain situations, you can tell who's going to struggle and have a hard time, because this kid has no idea how to count carbs. And as many times as you bring them in for education, like, they're 11 years old. Mm. And what does that look like? So, and it's hard, like, we, like, go to school to learn how to interpret these graphs and make adjustments. Like, even for families that are the most supportive, like, a lot of families are afraid to adjust settings on their own. I love and encourage them to always do so. But, like, for a kid, again, managing on their own, they're not going to do that. So we're making adjustments every 4 months if they're able to even get to their visits consistently.
Do this with me for a second. That idea of, like, you just adjusting it every 4 months, it's just a shot in the dark, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You're just like the A1C went up, the time in range got worse. I'm going to put in more. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm looking to see where I need to adjust, but yeah, like, I encourage my patients to always reach out to me through my chart, our little online portal, like, much more frequently if they're noticing trends, because every 4 months, that's not enough. And being realistic, but also we don't have the availability to see patients more frequent than that in most cases.
When you use a DIY algorithm and you see the difference in basal and insulin sensitivity and bolusing sometimes like hours to hours, but day to day, it really does it makes me feel like, what is the point of, like, these like quarterly adjustments? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, if this is what happens to a person who has, like, a 5.5 to a 6 A1C, then no wonder they have, I mean, because we're talking about people with 8s and 9s and 10s, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Greater than 14s.
Oh, yeah. And so no wonder these other people are having this, like, because if the variability is hour to hour, day to day, and we're adjusting every 120 days, then this is just meaningless. Like, almost meaningless. Like, it does fall to them understanding. And then if you get to the point where you say, like, as your example goes, like, they can't count carbs, then that's where you have to start talking to them about, all right, listen, you probably eat the same things all the time. Like, every time you count this, you seem to be off. So forget counting it. Like, look what happened here. You know what I mean? Like, you use this much insulin and it looks like 2 more units would have been appropriate. So next time you eat this, like, let's just make it 5. and like see what that, like, you have to start giving them that kind of autonomy. But then that gets outside of any real medical like advice that you would be comfortable giving, right? Like that's not a thing you could say to somebody.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's so like, you have patients who could care less about their diabetes and patients who care so much, and each one of them has their own frustrations with it. So like, I just saw a 12-year-old on Monday who she's doing excellent on the pump, but her A1C went up from like 6.9 to 7.5. And she asked to go back to injections. And I was like, whoa. Let's see what's going on here. And, her pump, she's on Omnipod 5. So she was getting kicked out of her pump because
high blood sugars.
High blood. And because she was getting like 15 more units in basal in auto mode than manual mode. I'm like, we just need to make these adjustments. You are not doing anything wrong. Like, let's talk about why the pump is better. And one thing I really try to stress with patients who don't want the pump yet is like, when you give shots, you do 4 times a day and you're feeling good. Like, I just gave 4 shots a day. I'm doing a great job. But if you think about it, on your pump, it's making adjustments to your blood sugars every 5 minutes. You cannot beat that. You can eat pizza at bedtime and wake up with a normal blood sugar. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to wake up at 2 a.m. and expect to give a correction. Like, that is amazing technology.
Stephanie, sweating your ass off. Like, oh my God, what's wrong? Like feeling nauseous, like all that. Like, what's interesting here to me is that like the A1C goes up the tiniest little bit. And then the person is like, I want out. Like this bad, number bad, got it better last time. Like that. It's like that simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the next thing I want to ask you about is that idea of like, some people don't care about their diabetes. So like, do you think they don't care, or do you think that they're lost and don't know what to do? Or are there some of it, both?
That's a good question too. I have some patients that I've seen for 3 to 4 years now, I guess I've been back, and we have the same visit every single time. They're on the Dash. So they're not in auto mode, which, okay. Right. But they're not putting in any boluses. And then they're like, if I have Omnipod 5, it's going to make a difference. So we switch them to Omnipod 5. There's still no boluses, Omnipod 5, I love it. I wear it. It does not work if you don't bolus. It's just not going to work. So, there's certain patients that just don't want to interact with their diabetes. And I don't think it's that they don't care, because I think deep down they really do. Like, it's easier to put up that front than to like admit that they're struggling from, a diabetes related depression, a severe burnout. But, we have psychologists that can meet with the patients, but I don't know. I think burnout is one of the hardest things to deal with.
Dig into it with me, Stephanie, for a second. Like, just pick one of them in your head. We don't want any identifying conversations, right? But like, somebody who you think just doesn't bolus for their meals, do they understand the long-term implications of what they're doing?
I don't know. Does any teenager necessarily? I think I don't know. I think in a lot of settings, people do understand the long-term effects, even teenagers. But I think what's really hard is when you feel fine at 200. I think the body's like a thermostat. If you're constantly running 60, you're not going to feel low. If you're constantly running 240, you're not going to notice these symptoms of running high. And it's really hard to see that in the long run, you are going to have these issues. And I had so many adult patients that I would see that would be like, God, and now their A1Cs are like 6.5, but they've had, 1 amputation. And they're like, if only I just would have been like, okay, it takes 2 minutes to bolus, then I would have just done it. Because now they run their blood sugars perfect, because they get it, because they had to experience some sort of, severe complication.
The question is how to get them there without them being smacked in the face with something.
Right. And I don't know. I really don't like to use scare tactics. I have before. I think in a certain patient, I have had to do it because nothing else seems to get through to them. I don't know. I haven't seen what's happened yet, but
it's the time.
Yeah. I think, I'm hoping it worked, because, there's a point where like, also, a lot of our kids, they don't have like microalbuminuria yet and things. And I think once that becomes positive too, that sometimes, not always, gets parents a little more on board to then, prod at the kid to take their insulin. But I think there's a fine balance too between parents and kids trying to maintain their relationship and not have it hurt so much from a constant nagging of take care of your diabetes. Did you bolus? Like that also plays a huge impact on families. And that's really hard.
Basically, we're talking about smoking. This is
Yeah.
right. This is smoking. It's, I feel good when I'm doing it. Doesn't seem to be a problem. You're telling me that 40 years from now, I'm going to have lung cancer. That doesn't sound like something's really going to happen to me. If you degrade slowly. You don't feel the degradation happen. And then once it's too late, it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's smoking.
Yeah, it's smoking. And so, yeah. So like if you, I guess we, and how did we fix that in the population? Because hold on a second. Ready? Hold on a second. Let me go over here to this screen. How many Americans smoke today versus 20 years ago? Hold on. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah. I'm just asking our computer overlords for some details here. American adults has significantly declined over the past 20 years. In 2021, 11.1% of U.S. adults smoke cigarettes. This represents a notable decrease from approximate 20.9% in 2004. How about that? So, okay. Wow. So hold on. How did we accomplish this? Public awareness campaigns, increased taxes, smoking bans in public, regulations on tobacco advertising, health warnings on the package, smoking cessation programs, cultural, social shifts. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of those, media things were scare tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like, that'd be like putting on the pump, use or lose limb.
Yeah. No, right. Yeah. What's this say on my insulin here? Yeah, right. So, but is it highlighting that these people they're not bad people. They're not dumb people. They don't want bad outcomes for themselves. This is just how a human brain works around stuff like this.
In a way, yeah. I think like out of sight, out of mind. If you're out with your friends and you have to bolus, why bolus? Then you're different and you feel fine. So why would I stop skateboarding right now to take insulin for this Slurpee? Yeah. I don't know. I think the biggest thing I always try to emphasize is like, you don't even know how much better you're going to feel if you just take your insulin. Like you're going to be less tired. You're going to be way less thirsty. You're going to focus better. Like I just really try to frame the positives. Also, I think too, like, for the patients that aren't going to do it, we have an option now. We have the iLet.
Mm-hmm.
And that pump is great for patients. Well, I think we're learning more and more about it. Whereas like you have to consistently announce meals or consistently not announce meals for it to work the best. But I do think there is like a huge advantage to it, like in a completely different direction of the use of this pump. Like I have a family who is not from this country. They do not speak any language that would be on an insulin pump. They eat very different foods. So counting carbs is out of the question. And so we use fixed dosing for shots right now. And that has resulted in a whole gamut of issues from hypoglycemic seizure to running really, really high, although they never go into DKA because the parents are amazing and they always get their insulin. But the amount of insulin, really hard to figure out what they're doing at home. And so we're working toward getting them an iLet because, they will consistently be able to bolus, and the girls are getting old enough that they'll be able to use their pump to do so.
Yeah.
And I think, that is pretty much this technology that is out there is going to change diabetes, especially in this population that doesn't want to think about it because it does the thinking for them. Like, even if I can get a patient on a tandem pump, if you're not going to bolus on a tandem, I would say I could still probably get your A1C to an 8 instead of greater than 14,
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a huge difference in terms of risk reduction.
It's good of you to use the numbers, because I think people listening might, when they hear high A1C, they think like 8, you know. I think
an 8's a win.
Yeah, for a lot of the people you're dealing with, it absolutely is, right? So I think what I've done here is, I think I built a community of people who are actively engaged in their health. And so when we stop to talk about some of these other devices, sometimes I think most of them listen and go, iLet, like what? I don't want that. You know what I mean? Like, and of course you don't. If your A1C is 5.5 and your time in range is crazy and, you know, like 90%, yeah, you probably don't want the iLet. Not in its current form. Maybe you would in the future. I don't know what they're going to do to it, you know.
Right.
But for right now, I keep saying out loud, because I want people to listen, you don't realize that most people with type 1 diabetes are running around with crazy high A1Cs and not giving themselves insulin. And, you know, and that these devices will help them significantly. You could take a person with a 14 A1C and give them a 7. Oh my God, right? Even if you gave them a 9, what a great thing. And that's why talking to people like you is so interesting, because you actually talk to everybody. You see all gamuts of people, right? Like I'm sure you help people who roll in there every time and they're like, hey, what's up? Crack their knuckles. They're like, what is it, a 5'6" or a 5'7"? And then, you know, like you josh around a little bit and write their scripts and go, oh my God, you're the best part of my day. And then like that kind of thing, right? Like, is that about what happens?
Yeah, that was actually my Monday.
Okay. And so those people don't need help because for whatever reason, their brain works with what's happening to them and they're doing the things they need to do when they need to do it. But what about everybody else? And we don't talk about it because it's uncomfortable. But it's happening to most people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you think about it too, and there's people that go above and beyond with their care and they're still not seeing results. And it's like, well, you know, that's okay. Your child is 4. They half the time eat their full meal. They half the time don't. Half the time they're running around like a crazy person. And the other time they're, you know, it is so hard. Diabetes is so hard. And I think that's what everyone needs to realize is everyone is doing the best. Well, most people are doing the best that they can. And I really think if you put any effort toward it, you should be really proud of yourself because it is so frustrating. You can do the same thing every day and get completely different results. Like that is hard. And so
I think it's you can say that they're doing the best they can, even if they're not, like, even if you realize like, look, there's a world where they could do more, right? But they're not. There's something stopping them. Like what's happening in your mind and your body and your life is not just what you talk about in your endocrinologist office. So like, how come you don't just bolus your meals? Well, you know I should, blah, blah, blah. But then you don't know what happens if they get home and there's a drunk parent or a high parent and they're busy, like just trying to stay out of the way and not get hit or not get yelled at or not get, you know, there's a lot of things happening to people that you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so like, they could actually be living a life where dying from a diabetes complication in 30 years is not even in their top 10 problems. So they are doing
100%.
Yeah, they are doing the best they can. And are they doing the best that's available? No, that's not your job, right? Like, how are you going to handle that bigger problem for them? Like, I think sometimes the sadness of it is that people who have the bandwidth to take care of themselves sometimes get diabetes, and people who don't have the bandwidth to take care of themselves also get diabetes.
For sure. It doesn't discriminate. And it requires, as how we know it today, aside from the iLet, it requires you to be literate in math. And unfortunately, a lot of our pumps do not have other languages. So I hope you speak and read English. Like it's really hard, especially for families that are not, you know, from, you know, the typical places that are manufacturing these devices.
Yeah.
It is interesting. I mean, it's a disease that affects the whole world. So I don't know how to fix that issue, but I wish that something could be done about that.
I was so proud of myself for a piece of time when I put together the Pro Tip series. And then when we like made the Bold Beginnings for people who were newly diagnosed, and I can see like, Steph, I have 50,000 active members in a private Facebook group. Like, so
wow, that's amazing.
That group does, I haven't looked in a while, but the last time I looked, it does 125 new posts a day. 8,000 likes, comments, and like hearts like combined, and it adds 150 new people every 3 days. So
wow,
it's fascinating to watch people who either get it or are actively trying to get it talk to each other. Because the community part is, I think, the most important part of it for a number of different reasons. And then I end up being in this situation where I look and I go, wow, 50,000, that's insane. Like really, really amazing. I think I probably run the most active, valuable diabetes group on the planet. But
yeah, that's amazing. That's incredible numbers.
But Stephanie, it's only 50,000 people.
I know.
You know,
you're getting to the people that have internet and know how to use Facebook or
have time.
Whatever.
Yeah, they have the intellect, the time. Their husband's not chasing them with a knife, like or whatever it is, right? Like the people who are actually able to go, hey, you know what? It's 2:00 in the afternoon. I've got a couple of minutes. Let me listen to this episode about extending my bolus. like that's not everybody, not everybody's life. And when I realized that, I've just spent so much time in my own head trying to figure out, like, how do you put this together for the other people? That this isn't, and I don't know the answer either. I rack my brains trying to come up with the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's just like, again, something that iLet brings is an ease of use of like interact with the pump as least as you possibly can, but it allows people. I think you can't discriminate people who might not be technologically savvy to use diabetes technology. Like it needs to be offered to all patients. Yeah. I think that's so important because it's like a cheat code having a Dexcom and having a pump these days. You know, it's really unfair to not offer it to everybody. And I think that's one thing that's super important is like, you know, making that accessible.
So I've been having more episodes about iLet, and I do it. It's kind of at my detriment because I know that the core audience for this podcast is like, I don't want a 7A1C. I'll count my carbs.
Yeah.
I just think it needs to get out there more. And I have the biggest platform, so I'm trying to be more aggressive about it because of all of the other people. And these are the people you can't market to. You can't sell to them. You can't sell to their doctors because their doctors are looking at them like, here's another one coming in who's just going to ruin their life. And nothing I can do about it. Like that bad attitude exists in their life as well. Every time I've interviewed someone from Beta Bionics, I've implored them to go to GPs and talk to them because I don't even think most of these people are going to endocrinologists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally true too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to see them educate GPs about, look, just slap this thing on people and see if they can't get things together a little bit, you know?
Yeah. And you know, I keep talking about the iLet. Like, I think Tandem is an amazing pump. And I really also love Omnipod. It is true, though. There's some cool, even if you have an A1C of 6.5 or whatever you have, there is some awesome part of iLet that always draws me to it. That's like, I could go on a vacation to Italy and eat a whole bowl of pasta and 5 pizzas and whatever I want and not have to think about how many carbs that is and how to bolus for that. Like, that's pretty awesome. That burden reduction is something I think that really, you know, maybe you're going to get a slightly different, a little bit higher A1C, but again, going back to risk reduction, like what's the difference between a 6.8 and a 7.1? I don't actually know if it's going to be that significant. So if it improves quality of life that much for someone who is instead, you know, counting 1.5, putting in 1.5 carbs, like for a small, like 2 almonds or something, you know, I think, what about giving yourself that freedom back?
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I actually, to go a little farther, I think Omnipod was trying to split the difference with Omnipod 5. I think they were trying to be like, look, this is more aggressive, but it also really doesn't want your involvement all that much. You just have to put in the meals. You know what I mean? Because it's not set up for you to understand how it's working. Like, so it's not a tinkerer's like device. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah.
And that part of it kind of drives me crazy because I feel like it's conservative.
Yeah. And listen, I don't work there and I don't know anything. And I want to be clear about that because people think I know stuff. I would imagine that they're working on that behind the scenes to make it a little more aggressive. Like they hear the feedback, right? That's the feedback.
Yeah.
So I like the idea. because they know the thing that we don't talk about, which is a lot of people aren't putting in the effort that's necessary all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And what if we could cover that effort with a mechanical device?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really noble goal, sincerely.
Oh, yeah. And I guess going back to some of my patients that don't bolus and, they have 5 episodes of DKA, when I do tell them about the iLet, I see them smile about their diabetes for the first time, knowing that that's out there. Mm-hmm. So when you were asking, like, how do you get through to those patients? I think showing them there is a light at the end of the tunnel, like letting them know you do this well for 2 months. So we somewhat know what your insulin requirements are. And then by that time, you'll be ready for your pump training, because we book a little bit far out for pump trainings.
Right. Training is going to be, what is it? Normal meal, small meal, large meal, something like that? Breakfast, lunch, dinner?
Pretty much, basically. Yeah. It's just, I think those first 4 days, they really want you eating regular meals. So the pump learns what a regular meal is.
Yes.
To get it set up.
I just did an interview with them that went up the other day. You'd probably really like.
I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah. And because they're also looking at dual hormone now. Mm-hmm. So it's episode 1217, by the way. This dual hormone pump, which in my estimation allows them to even probably try to be more aggressive with the algorithm if they can catch it on the back end with the glucagon. And so I can't wait to see where that goes to. That's all very interesting. I also think AI is going to be really valuable for people with diabetes in the next 5 years too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But again, those are tools. That's a tool that you need to be interested in using. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not a thing that's just everybody's going to do it, but maybe one day, it will get to that point. I find these conversations intellectually inspiring and emotionally draining because there's at the moment not a real answer for how do I go find a person who can't find a way to bolus for their meals and help them. Mm-hmm. I keep thinking I'm going to talk to somebody who one day is going to be like, oh, Scott, I know. And I'm waiting for that to happen, I guess. But you don't have the magic bullet answer either, huh?
Unfortunately, I do not.
Oh. And how hard is that on you? You come off like a really lovely person. So at what point are you not going to be able to drag your ass out of bed every day to hear somebody go, no, I don't bolus for my meals? When are you going to burn out on helping them? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I don't think I can because, sure, even working in endocrinology, I still have nights where I'm up at 2 a.m. feeling terrible and eating 4 packs of fruit snacks, or my blood sugar is stuck at 300. And so I have to be there to advocate for them and to just let them know it's okay. I just feel like getting diabetes sucks, but it gave me a real purpose. And so I don't know. I feel like I really hate diabetes, but I love it. Does that make sense?
It does. No. It does. I worry about psychological pressure that comes back to you. At what point do you become the cop who just expects that everybody's breaking a law? You know what I mean? Because it'll happen eventually. And it sucks because for you, listen to all the motivation you have. Maybe it's never going to happen to you, or maybe it'll take forever to happen to you. But for the people who are just look, I just wanted to be a doctor. You know what I mean? Why do you, sometimes I ask people, why do you help people with diabetes? And I'm I don't know. It made sense to me. And I was okay. So they're not there for some bigger reason. And then how many visits do they have to, how many doors do they have to open up and then hear my A1C is 14 and I don't know, man. I don't know how to, I don't want to bolus for this. I don't want to have diabetes that. Until they just go, I don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When does it kill them inside a little bit?
I guess I would say one thing that really helps is having an amazing team. And I love our team. They keep me going too. There are definitely days I'm frustrated where I'm oh my gosh, not again. We had the same talk last time. And, I think our team just keeps me going as well. Obviously the patients, but then having my team to talk through things with and give new ideas of what we're going to try for next time. And even just like a referral to just go over diabetes basics again with the educator, I think is huge. And so I think that's important as well.
Yeah. I don't know how you don't just like blurt out, oh my God, just fucking take care of yourself. I know it's hard to like make a person see the future, especially a younger person. I get that, right? Like I understand the whole like something has to happen. Like, listen, Stephanie, I've interviewed so many adults who will tell the story of it's just it feels like it's such a personal story to them. But I'm like, oh my God, I've heard this 1,000 times.
Yep.
You know, I got diagnosed and my parents took care of it for a while and I was doing great. But then I went off to college and I didn't really pay attention to it. But I don't know, I got through somehow. And they're like, oh, what were your A1C? It's like, and like really high, you know. And then I got out and I thought, oh, I'll take care of it as an adult, but I didn't. And then always the same thing happens to the people who get saved before complications. They meet a person that they want to be healthy for. Stephanie, I'm telling you all the time, I met a guy, I met a girl, I had a baby, I wanted to have a baby. Those are the things that snap people back the fastest. Helping themselves is not nearly as easy as helping themselves for someone else.
You ought to get all like little singles nights.
I like where your brain jumped. You're like, we just got to get all these people hooked up and then their diabetes will be better.
So we're hosting a diabetes singles night for 18 and older.
Stephanie, that was such a 30-year-old thing to say. That was fantastic. Thank you. I was thinking, how do we find something in their life that they care about enough that they need to be healthy for it? Or does it have to be a person? Because I listen, generally speaking, I'm an upbeat, hopeful person. But if I was living in a terrible situation, or if I was flat broke, or I didn't have any prospects in my life, I don't know why I'd care that much about my health. Like, what am I getting healthy for?
Right.
You know what I mean? To go live in an alley? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so, like, there's got to be a thing. Like, I just think it's a very human thing to need a goal.
Yeah. I mean, my patients who are goal-oriented athletes, or I have one that wants to be a pilot and has to like prove incredible blood sugars. Those patients do so well. Or like in my adult care, the ones that lost their license because maybe they had a car accident with a low blood sugar, you know, those ones trying to prove to the DMV they have good blood sugar. Those are incredible blood sugars.
So I'm right then. A goal motivates people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take something away or put it at risk, and I think you see a benefit. But also the pressure of that is crazy.
Stephanie, let me say something crazy to you for a second.
Okay.
What if you launched a little test thing? Okay. And I'm going to tell you how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost $10,000 to run this test. And we're going to take 10 of your people who are like, I don't bolus, I don't do this, blah, blah, blah. And you tell them that at the end of 6 months, if they can maintain this range and bolus for their meals, etc., they get $1,000 at the end of 6 months. You do it with 10 people and see if the goal motivates them to help themselves.
That is an awesome.
It's not a bad idea.
I
right?
love that.
Because
so now we just need to find a donor.
10 grand. Somebody call Stephanie. That's all I want. Like, because I want to see what happens. Do 10 of those people go, oh, well, for $1,000, I can do it? I'll tell you something. This idea comes from a couple of different places. It comes from 3 different ideas that I've lived through. I'm 52, Stephanie. I'm pretty much almost dead. So I've been around a really long time. Okay.
52 is the new 30.
Yeah. Good. Tell my knee. My father, 3 packs a day. When he was managing his smoking, it was 2 packs a day. In the 80s, his boss, who really liked him, grabbed him and pulled aside and said to him, Ben, don't smoke for a month. I'll give you $1,000. And my dad did not smoke for a month. Now, he did eventually die. He did eventually die of heart failure. But so I don't know if we needed $1,000 every month to keep him moving, but he did it. My dad, who would break out into a sweat if he didn't have a cigarette every couple of minutes, stopped for a month for money. Okay. Now, my next thought here is an episode I did with a mom whose kid wanted a chainsaw. And I told her to pay him for every time he pre-bolused up until the value of the chainsaw.
Did it work?
Okay. I've heard that it worked. My third thing is that I worked in a corporate setting when I was really young. And I would frequently get pulled in to human resources meetings because I was seen as a common sense person, even at my young age. And they would ask me over and over again, how do we motivate people? How do we motivate people? And I would sit in those meetings and say, I don't care what anybody else says. It's so nice to say that, oh, we need education. We need to be able to like motivate people. We can do monitoring. Technology will help. We want to support them. I'm like, money. People care about money. Give them money.
Mm-hmm.
And when they finally went to a bonus system, they got the work out of people they wanted. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's brilliant. I do think $1,000 is very awesome. I think if it was more like $25, I don't know if we'd see the same effect.
No, you need a number that makes people go, hold up. How much?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm going to win $1,000 if I can just pre-bolus my meals. Okay. Like, cause that's really like, Stephanie, between you and I, that's the deal. Good settings, pre-bolus your meals, don't stare at a high, pretty much done, right?
100%.
Yeah, it's an A1C in the 6s.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. That's what I think. Like, I think you do that, and then you say to them, look, now you feel better. Now you know how to do it. Now we've made a habit. Now do it for yourself, right? Take your $1,000 and go do something awesome with it, and pre-bolus tomorrow because you want to feel this good and be this healthy. Because they have brain fog they don't even know about.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like maybe you can get them clear and then, am I making that up? Like high blood sugars alter you. Yeah.
I think it'd be awesome. I'd also be really curious what happens post winning $1,000.
Oh, I would be too. Some people are going to drop off, but you'll save a few of them.
Yeah. No,
right?
I think it's great. And I think too, just like, you know, it's like brushing your teeth. You don't want to do it. You want to just go to bed and just like, you know, be ready for the day. Mm-hmm. But once you do it, it's a habit. And I think that's kind of how taking your insulin is too. Once they just do it and see, okay, that took an extra 30 seconds. Yeah. It's really not, I mean, yeah, it's again, diabetes is hard and it's not fun to have to be different, but it, you know, it's not that much more time. It's not like you're taking 30 minutes out of your day before you eat. Like it's an extra 10, 15 minutes. It's not that bad.
Plus, if you were to write a research paper afterwards and present it to an insurance company and say, look, how'd you like to save untold millions of dollars by paying everybody $1,000 a year to manage their diabetes better? Yeah,
I mean, be brilliant.
Workplaces do it, right? They'll do exercise initiatives. Like they'll slap a little watch on you and give you a portal to report your steps or whatever. And at the end of the year, if you've done it, they give you $500. And people who don't need $500 do it. Like you know, people who are like people who have in another step of life. If you said to them like, look, I'll give you $500 to paint my room, they'd be like, get the fuck out of here. I don't need your money. Paint your own damn room. But suddenly, when it's a game and it has a prize, boom.
Yep.
Stephanie, when I was in 5th grade, my teacher did this thing in the last 2 months of the year where we set up a city in our room. So everybody had to think up a business, and then we made money, and everybody got money and they were paid. And then on Fridays, all the businesses set up like a flea market almost, and you tried to see who could make the most money. Like it was just, like a capitalism class almost in 5th grade. You know who won?
Who?
It was me. You know how I did it?
I had a feeling.
Did it with a roulette. I did it with a roulette wheel. So I came in. Awesome. I came in with a roulette wheel, and my teacher goes, "You cannot do gambling as your business." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So what I was going to do was I was going to sell squares on the roulette wheel for a $1, whatever our dollar was. And whichever one it landed on, the winner got half the pot. That was my plan. And the teacher goes, you can't do that. And so I went home and I was like, damn, because I made my dad build me a roulette wheel out of like wood. It's like, so
that's awesome.
I went home and Pac-Man was huge back then. So I made my dad buy me these little 5-inch paper plates and a can of yellow paint. And I laid them out, painted them yellow, cut a piece of pie out of them so they look like Pac-Mans. And you put $1 down on a square and the winner got a Pac-Man. And I was allowed to do that. By the time the 8 weeks was over, I had everyone's money, Stephanie. Okay.
That is awesome.
Yes. And I'm telling you, what it taught me about people can be valuable in helping people with their diabetes. And I'm going to tell you right now, if I could afford it, I would have already done this. I would have already started a community thing where you can go into a portal and just track your A1Cs and your variability and stuff like that, and found ways to incentivize people to work harder for their stuff. Like I would have already tried it, but I ain't got the funding. So I'm putting it on you.
Okay, someone reach out to me and give me the funding.
Okay. That's all, because you don't need money. You just need the prize. It's not like the job needs money, right? And then
any prize. How about a timeshare in Hawaii?
Stephanie's like, I could probably get my A1C down for a vacation.
Yeah, can I participate? I'm gonna stop bolusing for a little bit.
Every 6 months, this woman named Steph wins.
One time I'll be Steph, one time I'll be Stephanie. Then they won't know it's the same.
You'll be able to trick them. That'll be lovely. Okay, I want everybody to think about this and do this. So here's what I would do. I'd give them the pro tip series from the podcast or the Bowl Beginning series. I would tell them, like, look, listen to this. Put these things into practice. Ask me questions if you have any questions. And at the end of it, if we can, I don't know, in the first 3 months, if you can lower your A1C and improve your variability to this level, then you win 500. And then if you can do it for 3 more months and, and then get to the goal that we set together, you get another 500. And that's it. I mean, honestly, the truth is that it would be way cheaper to pay people for good health than it would be to spend the next 150 years wringing our hands going, I don't understand why Ben smokes so many cigarettes. How do we help him? Because you're not going to figure that part out.
When you put it that way, it's like, it sounds so easy. It's like, I know how to get to all these kids now. I'm just going to offer them $1,000.
PlayStation game.
I do really think that would work.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me? What about just a bucket of PlayStation gift cards or something like that?
Yeah.
Seriously. No kidding. Like come in here on... Boy, here's how I would do it. I go, look, I want to first give you one of these for free for doing nothing but being you. You're a terrific kid. I love you. Now, if you want another one when you come back in 3 months, you're going to pre-bolus your meals and we're going to bring your A1C down a little bit. You do that, you're going to get another gift card for your PlayStation. And then we'll find another thing for you to do. And before you know it, you'll have tricked them into taking care of themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a genius.
Yeah,
no one listens to me, Stephanie. No,
that is great.
No one listens to me, but people care about one thing: money. Okay.
Yep.
So, all right, I'm in. I understand what to do. All right, we're good. You have anything I didn't ask you that you want to bring up?
No, I think that was pretty much everything. It was great talking with you.
No, I had a good time. Do you think they will name a day after me one day if this works?
Yeah.
You think so?
I do. I think they do. I think we'll have an annual day for you at OHSU, honestly.
I want that. I want to become, look, can I be serious for a second? Not that I wasn't serious about the other stuff. I found a way to help so many people. And Stephanie, all it did was leave me with a feeling inside that there were a lot of people I didn't help. So I'm very happy with all the people who come to me and say, this saved my life, and oh my God, I'm so healthy because of you, and thank you. And people who joke about, like, do you know there are 9 states in America that have a Juicebox license plate because of the podcast? Like, I'm not even kidding.
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
I'm not even kidding about that. Okay. Like, and that stuff, I don't want people to think I'm like dead inside. Those things are all very cool and make me feel great. 5 stars. I love it. I'm a T1D and I love this podcast. Thank you, Scott. I'm not alone. When I was diagnosed, I felt like I was the only one who knew the true meaning of diabetes. My mom introduced me to the podcast, and I realized that there are millions of people who understand the feeling the same way as I do. Now I love listening, and I feel comfortable listening. My pets even like it. These go on forever. Okay. Like, I'm being serious. Like those reviews and notes, they happen every day. They go on forever, and it's fantastic. But in my heart, it's not enough people. And I know there's a section of society I'm never going to touch. And so I want to find a way to find them too before I get done.
And I guess just to add on to that, just to getting, again, patients with families who are able to do these things, but I couldn't recommend enough getting involved with your local JDRF walk when it's in town. It's such a feeling of community, and also really consider going to diabetes camp. It is such a you'll go every summer after that, but it is such a unique and like special experience to be around. Even for me, I didn't go as a kid because I was afraid of overnight camps, and going now as a provider, like, it is so fun and such a cool experience that I just can't even put into words. So I can't recommend that enough.
Dr. Marwa, who's actually part of the Grand Round series, said that during his training, part of his training was to go to diabetes camp. And that a big piece of his understanding about people's lives with diabetes comes from being at camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like the freedom at Gills Creek camp, which is what we have here in Oregon. The counselors, they carry all the diabetes supplies for the kids, so the kids can just run and be free. And I think that is like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. No, he learned about bolusing and what people understood and what they didn't understood. He actually got to see insulin work like live in people's bodies. And he said it was a huge help when he was learning to be an endocrinologist.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Okay. All right. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Take care.
Hold on 1 second.
Bye-bye.
Jalen is an incredible example of what so many experience living with diabetes. You show up for yourself and others every day, never letting diabetes define you. And that is what the Medtronic Champion community is all about. Each of us is strong, and together we're even stronger. To hear more stories from the Medtronic Champion community or to share your own story, visit medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox and look out online for the hashtag Medtronic Champion. A huge thanks to a longtime sponsor, Touched by Type 1. Please check them out on Facebook, Instagram, and at touchedbytype1.org. If you're looking to support an organization that's supporting people with type 1 diabetes, check out Touched by Type 1. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Dexcom G7, which now integrates with the Tandem T-Slim X2 system. Learn more and get started today at dexcom.com/juicebox. Are you starting to see patterns, but you can't quite make sense of them? You're like, oh, if I bolus here, this happens, but I don't know what to do. Should I put in a little less, a little more? If you're starting to have those thoughts, if you're starting to think, this isn't going the way the doctor said it would, I think I see something here, but I can't be sure. Once you're having those thoughts, you're ready for the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. It begins at episode 1000. You can also find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu, and you can find a list in the private Facebook group. Just check right under the featured tab at the top. It'll show you lists of a ton of stuff, including the Pro Tip series, which runs from episode 1000 to 1025. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. If you're not already subscribed or following the podcast in your favorite audio app like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do that now. Seriously, just to hit follow or subscribe will really help the show. If you go a little further in Apple Podcasts and set it up so that it downloads all new episodes, I'll be your best friend. And if you leave a 5-star review, I'll probably send you a Christmas card. Would you like a Christmas card? The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.